Good morning, golf fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our round 4 stream for the PGA side at Pebble, and of course, going to do a lot of focus here on the LIV Mayakoba stream. So, going to focus on both of those sides. Of course, a lot of crazy weather over there for Pebble Beach. So we'll talk about how to build your lineups. I think lock might be moved back. We'll have to see with Draftkings, but just to make sure we were safe, wanted to go live early enough so we could go out there and build our lineups regardless, right? If they move back lock, we'll have a better idea of how to approach it closer to noon. If not, got to have our lineups in the next hour, 45 minutes. So lock's going to be at 10:45 a.m. Go over here on the East Coast, Central Time. I guess that's what, 9:45 a.m. over there on the West Coast. That would be 7:45. Got to make sure you have all of your process done by then. What's going on, Robert? Yeah, we'll go over that for sure. Yeah, it looks like the earliest will be 10 a.m. Eastern time. So that would be that would be 10 a.m. local time, I should say, and 1 p.m. over here on the East Coast. What's going on, Joanne? What's going on, Jason, Carl, Metro, and Greg? Who comes out on top today? Well, I think it'll be Monday. So we'll hop on into it, right? We'll bring up the weather. We'll talk through what PGA Tour.com said and what I expect to see, which will probably be over here on Monday. So if you haven't seen the forecast yet, they're calling for 30-mile-an-hour sustained winds. And then over here from the wind gust perspective, close to 60, 70-mile-an-hour wind gusts. So as of right now, the earliest tee times would be right around 10 a.m. local, which you can see is when the winds are at their absolute highest. So I would say that there's little to no chance that they're actually going to play then. They're also getting a steady stream of rain for the next 4 or 5 hours. In fact, the rain may go the whole way until about noon local time over there. So if I was going to guess that they're going to play today, and honestly, I don't think they're going to play today. I think there's a really good chance that it's just moved the entire way to Monday or canceled, which we'll mention that possibility too. Monday doesn't look that much better. It looks like it's going to rain for a lot of today. And what I think the course conditions are coming down to isn't so much the winds, right? They know that the winds on Monday will be low enough for them to be able to play. It's all of this rain that they're getting, right? They've already gotten about an inch of rain over there at Pebble Beach. They're calling for about half an inch to maybe an inch more of rain to come down throughout the day. And if it ends up oversaturating the course, which was already extremely soggy out there, the issue is drainage, right? It's having puddles in the middle of fairways. It's having greens that are unplayable. I think that's what they're worried about. And frankly, if enough rain comes down, there's a chance that they can't even play out there on Monday. So I would say that the chances for play here on Sunday are slim to none. I honestly don't expect them to get out there. But if they're going to, it's going to be towards the end of this rainstorm. It's going to be when they're able to get some of those puddles cleaned up. And it would be for the last 3, maybe 4 hours of the day. So they're definitely not going to finish play today, right? That would be a best case scenario, right? If they were able to get out there towards like 2, 3 p.m. But the most likely scenario is that they're going to start there on Monday morning. The real X factor is going to be whether they can dry out the greens overnight. They'll probably put some sand down. They'll put, pumps out there on some of the puddles that are a little bit more troublesome. If they can get it cleaned up, make it somewhat playable by the time we get here to Monday morning, then you might see this event played. So frankly, we're not going to spend as much time on the PGA side here because I don't even think they're going to play. I think that there's a really good chance on Monday that they wake up after some overnight storms like you're supposed to have here tonight. And if that happens, it could be completely unplayable. So they've already set a deadline that they're not going to tee off after 10 a.m. local time over there. So if they can't get it cleaned up in the first 4 or 5 hours of daylight, we could be looking at a 54-hole event. But for the sake of this, we're still going to go through some analysis here. Let's assume that they can fit it in on Monday, right? Maybe they play 3 or 4 holes today, right? It's not going to be very much if they're able to get out there at all. Let's assume that most of the play is going to come down on Monday, and let's treat it like we would on any other Sunday Showdown slate. Well, if we look at Monday's weather, which the NAM model might be the best for that. Let me see. Did I screw up my screen sharing? All right, there we go. You can see it there once again. If we go over here to Monday on the NAM model, you can see they're still calling for rain during the day, which is certainly going to impact scoring conditions a bit, but also relatively high winds, right? It's in that 12 to 15 mile an hour range when it comes to your sustained winds. And then your wind gusts are there between 25 and 31 miles an hour. So if they're going to play on Monday, it's not going to be as nasty as what they would get today, obviously. I mean, today is just unplayable when it comes to the conditions. But if they play on Monday, it is going to be significantly harder, right, than we saw for the first 3 rounds. We had a scoring average around 2 of 2.6 under. Round 3 actually played even easier, which I thought I would play easy, right? 2, maybe 2.5 under par. I didn't have -3 on my bingo card, though. So you're definitely going to see it go the other direction, right? It's not going to play nearly as easy as what you had for the first 3 days. And in fact, the scoring average of 1 under par over there for Thursday is probably even a little bit optimistic too. So I would expect the scoring average to probably be at least a little bit over par. Some of the tee boxes, which I'll actually just bring up right now, the tee boxes are really straightforward here for the last round, are probably the only saving grace. So let me go ahead, share my screen, show you guys what we're working with. But it looks like if they're going to play, right, especially if they're going to get out there on Monday, that they're trying to make it borderline playable, right? They're trying to make it so it's not like a 1-2 over par scoring average, probably a little bit closer to even par. So you'll see a few examples. Hole 2 is a long par 5. So though it looks a little bit tucked, it's like a 520-yard hole. So most of the time you're getting up and down from the bunkers anyways. Something worth of note on hole number 2 is that it's the easiest pin location for getting up and down. You have a lot of slope that goes from the left to right over here on hole number 2. So if you miss in this bunker to the left, you're coming down the slope, but you have all that green to work with, about like 25, 30 paces to work with. So you'll definitely have the run out to get it close to the hole. Whereas if you miss over here to the right side, because all of that slope comes into you, right, from that left side to the right side, any miss in this right bunker is a lot simpler to get up and down because you can use the slopes to your advantage. So if we're playing this on Monday, it looks like they're trying to give the guys a little bit of a break. Hole 3, right, simple pin location, 5 paces off the side. Same thing, right, 5 paces off the side is extremely generous out there for the PGA Tour, and it's a front pin location on a relatively short hole. 5 is a longer par 3. It wouldn't surprise me if they take some of the longer par 4s, some of the longer par 3s, shorten them up out there for the last round. Anytime we get these adverse weather conditions where it's rain, wind coming sideways, you oftentimes see the tour take it easy on players. And based on these pin locations, that's exactly what it looks like. I mean, we've got pins that are 8 off the side in hole number 17, 9 off the side in hole number 14, 7, 5, 4. I mean, this just isn't regular, right? Normally we see pins that are tucked 3, maybe 4 paces off the side. And in the exception of, I think, like 3 out of the 18 pins, they're all at least 4 paces off the side, right? And 4 paces is normally on the generous end of that spectrum. So you're talking about pin locations that I think are going to give these players a little bit more of a chance to go out there and score. Like 17, right? Playing shorter, right? It's in that front right bulb. Also, not really all that tucked up against stuff, right? Sure, if you go long, you're going to be absolutely screwed, but it's also going to play to a much lower scoring average. Let's see, other front pin locations, like 18, right? The par 5 is going to play to a front pin location. 14 is no longer tucked over the bunker, right? You have a lot more room to work with, which means you have a better chance of getting up and down at that sort of par 5. Let's see, hole number 2 we already talked about, right? I think that's a pretty decent pin location for trying to get up and down and get a par. And what's the other par 5? I should know this off the top of my head, but I'm having a brain fart here. On the front 9, it's hole number 6. I should have known that. Just a little brain fart there. Hole 6 right there in the back right. I don't know about the slopes on that green, but I do know that it doesn't look that difficult, right? It is, one of the pins that's tucked 3 off the edge, but it's a par 5. It's a reachable par 5. That's about 535 yards, accounting for the uphill. Going to be one that these players take advantage of. So when we get to this round on Monday, I don't know if there's really a huge weather edge to be had, right? When we have threesomes, they're going to be sending them off of threesomes off of both tees. There's not really a way to take advantage of this weather. So I think if anything, right, we want to look at mutters, right, players that have a track record of still posting decent rounds even in adverse conditions. But outside of doing something like that, I don't see play the early guys, for example, right? I don't see oh, you want to play the guys that are all going off late. It looks pretty consistent to me, right? The winds, don't strengthen as the day goes on. And if anything, your wind gusts actually get a little bit calmer as the day goes on. So you could argue for a little bit of a reverse weather split out there, or maybe the PM guys are the ones that play a little bit better. But outside of that, not much that I see from the weather angle. Let's talk a little bit about PGA DFS. We'll go through my strategy in terms of Sunday Showdown, which is pretty much a Monday Showdown slate at this point. And then we'll talk props afterwards. So there's no prop board for PGA. I'll give you guys a little bit of a game plan when it comes to that angle, because if we do see play on Monday or even later on today, we probably get a board at some point, at least some kind of board right out there from Prize Picks and Underdog. And then afterwards, we're going to go through the LIV Golf stuff. So that's actually going to be the majority of the stream. So I'm going to try and go through this as quickly as humanly possible. So in terms of our Sunday Showdown, our strategy changes quite a bit because of the weather situation, which if this was a normal showdown round, it wouldn't change all that much. Right, we'd be looking for pivots. We'd be trying to find some ownership to get leverage to the field on. This kind of slate, though, is a little bit different, right? Placement points are in the fold here, and they mean a whole lot more when the scoring average is going to be over par, like we might see here for Monday, as opposed to when it's a -3 scoring average, right? Like we had out there for round 3. So rather than going after a lot of pivots, a lot of chasers in my Sunday Showdown lineups, I'm extremely contrarian when it comes to my Sunday Showdown lineups. I play them a lot differently than other pros out there. I take a lot more of a stand against the top end of the board. Not so much this time around, right? I'm playing the guys like a Scotty Scheffler, a JT there at -13, a Ludwig Aberg, right? One stroke off the lead are guys that would normally be auto fades for me on this kind of slate, but not with the weather conditions, right? If they go out there, they shoot -1, -2, which for an elite tier player in adverse conditions is pretty reasonable, right? They're going to play conservatively. They're not going to take a lot of risk out there like some of the chasers may. And if they shoot -1, -2, first off, that's a decent score fantasy-wise, right? But it's going to lock in a lot of placement points. For somebody like, let's say, a Max Homa, for example, or a Matt Fitzpatrick to go out there and be in the optimal lineup, they have to shoot like -3 or -4 and probably make an extra birdie or two, right? At least one extra birdie to go out and make up for the placement points. I just prefer, at least if I'm going to take chalk, right, on a slate with nasty weather like this, it's up top, right? It's on our ball strikers, the guys that have done it before. Scotty Scheffler, we know, is fantastic in adverse conditions. Justin Thomas, known for that as well. And I guess I'm taking Ludwig's word on it a little bit. He said that he would consider himself a mutter in his post-round interview. He's also in second place, right? So doesn't have nearly as much room to make up to go out there and finish in first place. I'll play a little bit of Aberg chalk out there at 42%. So again, kind of like most slates, right? If you're going to take that chalk, if you're going to take players that are, getting significantly more steam than the guys around them, the place to do it is up here in the 11 and 9K range. So that's the kind of strategy that I'm taking out here. Again, normally I'm a little bit more contrarian out here for my Sunday Showdown lineups, just not the slate for it though. Excuse me, guys. No, sorry about that. All right, let's move down to our 8 and 7K players. So we've got Jason Day here at -13. He's 20% owned, so he's another one of the guys towards the top that I'm just playing at relatively high ownership numbers. Keegan Bradley at 11.5%. Another guy that's kind of known for playing well in the wind, right? Playing decently when it's super wet out there, right, in the rain. So I like that for him. And then as soon as we get out of this 8K range, right? So like Jason Day, Keegan Bradley even, right? I wouldn't consider them pivots. After that, it is all pivots. There's a next to no chalk that I'm playing down here. The chalkiest guy I'd really say I'm on would be somebody like a Justin Rose. So that means a Wyndham Clark I'm fading, right? Because of his ownership down here in the 7K range. Matthew Pavon at 20.3%, right? That means that I'm fading these type of players. So because I'm taking my stance on chalk up there at the top end of the board, right, I'm avoiding these sort of players. So down here in the 7K range, first off, I'm kind of banking on Wyndham not winning, right? On somebody like Pavon not going out there and winning the golf tournament. If either one were to get those placement points for first place, I'm probably screwed. So that's just a calculated gamble that I'm taking, right, to try and get about 55% leverage to the field by crossing those two out. And the kind of guys I like are a Brian Harman, right? And the reason why is that Brian Harman is known for playing well in shitty conditions. I've heard the theory that guys that are shorter play well in the wind, which makes sense. I've heard that actually from some tour pros, rather casually, them mentioning that. But the more and more I thought about it, the more it makes sense, right? The taller you are, the easier it is to get buffeted around by the wind. Now, if you're heavier and you're taller, you probably don't have that problem. But if you're real light, you're a small, slight guy, like a lot of these PGA Tour players are, right? Not a lot of them are big burly like a Brooks Koepka. You want to be shorter and you want to be, somebody that's not as tall to not get buffeted around by the wind. So I think it was when Brian Harman was winning at Hoylake, you had that one real windy day. A few announcers mentioned that that's why he's probably better in the wind. I'm taking that, right? I'm looking at his track record, right, and running with that on this kind of Sunday slate. So 4.8%. You can find your pivots down here. Corey Connors, another excellent wind player. So not as much in contention, right? The placement points aren't going to be as easy to come by, but what you're banking on at least, are that a few of these, wind specialists, right, go out there and shoot like -3, -4. Because if they make 5 birdies in this kind of round, that's going to be enough to get to the optimal. Sepp Straka, same thing, right? Kind of known as a little bit of a mutter out there. I like him starting at -8 and only 3% ownership. Down here in the 6K range, we've got a Matt Kuchar at $6,400. If you need a grinder, somebody that can hit that low ball, take advantage of some nasty weather, he's usually your type of player. So he's not playing amazingly. They're at -6, I believe. Had a pretty shitty day ball striking yesterday, actually, but 2.5% ownership. These are the type of guys that I'm getting my leverage on. So just because I'm taking all this chalk up top does not mean that my entire lineup is going to be chalk. It's just calculated, right? You've got to pick your spots, your guys up top that you think are going to hold on to their position. And just personally, I trust the guys that are elite tier players. That I don't think that's that much of a leap of faith to make, right? To have a little bit more trust in these top end guys. And also the ones that have a track record of playing well in the wind. The only one I would say that's a little bit speculative, the one that's probably going to burn me, is the Aberg ownership, right? We haven't seen him in these type of conditions before. It could go one way or the other. And I guess I'm just assuming that he's a good man of his word, right? Going out there saying that he has a lot of experience playing in these conditions back in Sweden, which makes a whole lot of sense, right? Our narrative with all these European guys is that they grew up playing in these conditions, so that they can handle it. That checks out for the most part, but like Terrell Haddon, right, was really good in the wind. Guys like Matt Fitzpatrick, Tommy Fleetwood, right, like they drive that narrative even further. If that's the case with Aberg, he might just win this golf tournament. I mean, the guys, I actually didn't play him in DFS this week, right? I said that I didn't think this was a great setup for him. I said the same thing at the RSM Classic, right? I didn't think it was the best setup for him. Then he goes out there and wins that golf tournament. So at this point, he's the type of talent that can just transcend the golf course that he's playing on. And I'm a buyer in him long term. I already said like he'd be a top 5 player in the official World Golf rankings at the end of this year. Right? That was one of my hot takes, I believe, there during the fall swing. If he wins this, I believe he goes up to a top 10 in the official World Golf rankings, and he could be top 5 at the end of next month. So that's just the guy is good at golf. I think you all knew that. Probably didn't need to be told that, though. In terms of closing thoughts on this slate, we're going to hop to LIV here in just a few minutes. But if you're going to try and find any edge out here for PGA, a few things to worry about, I guess, would be withdrawals, right? If we're going to have this moved until Monday, some of your lower tier players might withdraw, right? So if you wanted to take a shot on like a Rory or even a Victor Hovland, for example, that might not care, right, about the last place money, right? Might not care about finishing in like T44th, whatever the case may be for these sort of players this week. Might just skip town, right? If they want to play Waste Management, right? Whatever event they're playing next week. Maybe some are going to the DP World Tour, right? For their event next week. Any of those kind of players you want to worry about a little bit. So just to give you a few examples, I suppose, let's see, especially the guys that are like well over par that are playing next week. So like a Nick Dunlap, I know is playing the Waste Management, right? He's a 7 over par. Now he's brand new to the sport, so he's probably not going to withdraw, but like he could right there at +7. Like he has nothing to gain by playing out here in the final round. Patrick Rogers at +5 is like on prime withdrawal alert, right? Alex Smalley, like anyone that's even par or worse, I would at least put on some type of withdrawal watch. So there's actually a player that I'm taking that I'm a little bit worried about. That would be Hideki Matsuyama at $7,700. I'm only playing him in about 7% of lineups. So I think I have him in like 3 of my 50 lineups. So that's actually closer to like 6% out there with my exposure. So not very much, right? He's a dart throw, if anything. And some of my largest field GPP lineups, he might withdraw after lock. Like if we end up getting the news, like let's say it locks at 10:45 a.m., like we expect, and then the next update we get around noon, right after lock happens, is that we're not going to see play till Monday. Like that's when Hideki would withdraw, right? That's when you'd have some of the other guys out of contention, like even a Max Homa, I guess you could put on withdrawal watch. Xander Schauffele, I guess I wouldn't throw it past him withdrawing at this kind of event. just keep an eye on that. So there's a few of these chasers that I'm playing regardless, right? Just because the ownership is going to be so low, but just know that that's an inherent risk with any of those players. Like my Hideki exposure, for example, I am totally okay if he withdraws. Like I know that playing him, right? So if you're going to take one of these guys that's really far back, like a Cam Young even at -1, Steven Yeager, even par. I'm just trying to give you guys like warning on these guys, right? Nick Taylor at even par, you probably want to worry about just a little bit. Any of those kind of guys, like just know that that's a possibility, right? If you're going to play them, you're getting low ownership, but just know they might withdraw. If they cancel today, do you think they'll restream tomorrow? I think there's a good chance of it, but it depends on the saturation of the course, right? How much rain that they're getting. So if they do play today, what wave will go? Not sure what you mean by that, but if they do play today, is there like a wave that's going to, go out? I think if they play today, it's going to have to be for at least like 2-3 hours, right? They're not going to send guys out for like an hour of play just so that they can get screwed by 70-mile-an-hour wind gusts. And then the leaders, right, the guys that don't tee off because the tee times are like 2.5 hours long, don't get hit by that. They're not going to do that, right? So if they send them out today, everyone's going to play. And it'll be 3 sums off of both tees, so you'll get all the tee times. Aberg is a Euro, group them in with all of them being mutters. Yeah, that's essentially, I don't disagree with that though, right? Like it kind of works, right? For the most part. I can think of a few Euro guys that aren't very good around the green, but it's only a few. There's far more that are pretty good at it, right? You're stunned Hovland and Homa didn't play well this week. I agree with you. A lot of people were on the double ho train this week. I know a few people were on the ho train, the Santa Claus train, taking Homa, Hovland, and Hogard out there in their lineups. Hogard's actually outperforming both of the other hoes, which is not something I had on my bingo card. I agree with you. They already moved lock to 1 p.m. There you go. Am I restreaming content? No, I won't be. There's no reason to, right? We're going to touch on everything here that we need to. In terms of strategy, right? It's not going to change very much if they move it. I'm going to be doing the same thing, right? So that's what we're doing. No need to restream that. What we are going to do now is hop over to the LIV Golf side. So before we do that, I guess I'll give you some closing thoughts in terms of props. I don't think we have a board yet. We'll double check though. You never know. Maybe they blessed us with a board for some reason. Yeah, I can't imagine that Prize Picks is going to post a board when there's probably not even going to be play today. If I had to get gander. So yeah, we'll talk about a game plan here. So if we're talking about round 4 props, I think we're going to get them like right before they actually go out and play. So let's say that they're going to get and play this afternoon. I think as soon as the tour announces that they're going to play is when these boards are going to drop. So you're going to have to be quick. You're going to have to react to the news rather quickly. My apologies again. Still not feeling 100%. But you're going to have to react quickly, right? Because I don't think you're going to have a ton of time to go out there and get your analysis done. And you kind of have to know what to expect. So in terms of a scoring average, I think it's going to play a little bit over par. If they started today, it'd be a lot over par in terms of your scoring average. But if they were to start on Monday, which is, I think, the most likely scenario, let's be honest here, guys, it's probably going to play just slightly over. The pin locations look easy. I would imagine that they're going to move up tee boxes. So while some people might be quick to go, oh, 35-mile-an-hour wind gusts, oh, rain, that's going to be a horribly hard round. Not so much, right? It's a 7,000-yard golf course. It's not very long. The rough is not penal out there. Even as wet rough this week, it has not been that bad. So you're talking about players that I think the hardest part about it, right, would be the wind, right, would be missing some of those greens. They gave them cupcake pin locations. Like you can't even short side yourself to a pin that's 7 paces off, right? You have all the room you need to get up and down. Trust me, they're trying to account for that, right? I think they know they're going to play on Monday. If they had to play today, right, you definitely wanted these softer pin locations, but I'm sure they looked at Monday's forecast and they said, it's not all that much better than what we have here for Sunday. So let's give these players a little bit of a bone. So I actually think there's going to be some overs on birdies we can take and unders on strokes, which sounds counterproductive. It depends on the pricing, right? We're going to have to see where they price the board. But I have a feeling, and you see this a lot with these win slates, that they'll overcompensate, that they'll post guys like a Rory, for example, at like 72 or even like 72 and a half strokes. If you're telling me I can bet on one of these elite tier players to shoot even par or better out here on this kind of course conditions, I'm going to be a buyer on that. If they give us birdie props, for example, right, on like elite tier players at 3.5 or maybe even 4 birdies on a few special cases, I'm going to take the over on that. Because what people don't understand about windy conditions in particular, wet conditions suck, right? If you're playing through the rain, that's always a bad thing. But what they don't understand about wind is that it goes both directions, right? You can play into the wind sometimes and you can play downwind sometimes. This was best illustrated when they played the Genesis Scottish Open this year over there at the Renaissance Club, and everyone took overs and took unders on birdies, overs on strokes, unders on birdies for the final round there. It was super windy, right? I think everyone expected it to be absolute carnage, but what they didn't realize is that every hole into the wind, the tour just shortened 60 yards out there on the final day, and every hole that was downwind was like the shortest hole ever. Like you had 500-yard par fours that were driver wedge in. I mean, it was that type of day. That's how windy it was downwind. So those holes actually played easier, right, because of the downwind nature. And then the holes that were into the wind played slightly harder, right, because of those, nasty conditions. But it was only slightly harder because they moved up the tee boxes. Do not be surprised if that happens. They do that almost every time we have nasty conditions. They do it at the Players' Championship. Hell, they even do it at major championships like the Open this year to try and account for this type of conditions. If they'll do it at a major, they will sure as shit do it at Pebble Beach. So put that in your bingo cards. I actually think, depending on the pricing, that we could have a lot of value on some unders on strokes and overs on birdies. So it's a little bit of a hot take for sure. A lot of it comes down to the pin locations that we're looking at. But the tour has a funny way of going out there and fucking things up when we have these nasty conditions, right? Like tour fans want to see it play difficult. Like we want to see the guys struggle every once in a while. Doesn't look like we're going to get that today. Let's hop over to the LIV side now. Let's see. Any questions on PGA? Looks like we're good. If you're just here for PGA, appreciate you guys. Best of luck out there with your exposure, whether it's today or on Monday. But now we're going to spend a lot of time over here on LIV. So we've got full slate today. We've got Showdown we could talk about for LIV, and of course some prop stuff where I've already got a bunch of exposure in over here on Underdog, a bunch of exposure in over here on Prize Picks, and some slips we're going to go over together, and more importantly, how to attack the slate. So give me a second. Let me get some coffee in me, and let's get this show on the road. So in terms of our wind conditions, it actually looks a lot different now than what it did before. So my Koba, why is it zooming in on the wrong spot? It's up here. My apologies. We're pretty much on the golf course here with our projections. And you'll see that some of the models here, actually all of the models here now, are calling for really shitty winds. So a lot of my slips that I've already put in are unfortunately assuming that it wasn't going to be. Actually, we're looking at Monday. Thank Lord. I was about to get really worried here for a second, guys. I wasn't going to get upset because that shit happens sometimes. But look at this, Sunday, much better conditions, right? You're looking at the wrong day there. So I'm glad I made that mistake now because, like I mentioned, a lot of my stuff I had taken were like unders on strokes and overs on birdies. The reason why is because the conditions weren't all that shitty. So now that we were seeing like 40-mile-an-hour wind gusts, I was like, oh, that's great. And all the models had this like 40-mile-an-hour wind gust. I was like, oh, so we're going to get screwed on those. That's great. Not the case, right? Looks pretty beautiful for Sunday. You're talking about like sub 8-mile-an-hour winds. Icon model, the same thing, sub 8-mile-an-hour winds. GFS model, same thing. And then ECM model, maybe slightly higher winds, but they're usually the most exaggerated of the bunch. A lot of times they post projections that are a little bit higher than you see on some of the other models. So not so much a surprise. The important part here, right, is that you have sub 9-mile-an-hour sustained winds for the entire day. So if we look at the scoring averages from rounds 1 and 2, yesterday was a lot windier than what we had for round 1, and it actually played slightly over par, right? It played to about a 0.96 over par average. Part of that's field strength, right? Part of that is some of the outlier performances that we had towards the bottom. I mean, guys like Andy Ochiltree, right, shot 8 over par, Grace 7 over par, Perez 7 over par. There were definitely a lot of big numbers that influenced this. But day 1, when you had much less wind out there, played slightly under par, right? So about nearly a stroke and a half difference between the 2 days. And the weather conditions that we're going to see for Sunday, which this 40-mile-an-hour wind gust had me shaking in my boots for a second. look a lot more like Thursday, right, than what they did for Friday. If they were going to look like they did for Friday, those unders on strokes and those overs on birdies I took wouldn't look nearly as good as what they do now. Because over here for the first day of action, you had plenty of players getting it under par. In fact, a lot of guys that were -2, -3 or better. I think it was about like 35% of the field that shot -3 or better. And something like 40, maybe 45% that got closer to -1, -2. So a lot of guys that were breaking par out there. You still had quite a few guys that were outliers out there for the first round. You had a bunch of guys that were still like 4 or 5 over par. So once again, a little bit misleading. You take out some of the outliers. Heck, even if you take out Joaquin Niemann's -12, right? His 59 out there. The scoring average was a little bit closer to 1 under par. So I'm expecting a scoring average of maybe like half a stroke under par here for the last day, maybe even a little bit better than that with how calm it's supposed to be. And LIV Golf also tends to use a lot of like moving day pins out there for their last round. So I think you're going to see quite a few birdies out there. Round one, there were 4.21 birdies per round on the LIV Tour. I think you're going to see at least that for Sunday, if not slightly better, right? 4.3, maybe a 4.35 birdie per round average, which should be pretty good perspective, right? Before we hop into the prop boards here. Let me check the LIV Golf Twitter. They said at some point, I actually talked to one of their like influencers, whatever. I was just like DMing with them. I was like, dude, are they ever going to post pins like over there on the LIV Golf comms or whatever? He said at some point, but I have yet to see it yet. Yeah, it doesn't look like we have the pins up there yet. It'd be nice to know the pin locations, right? I mean, we've been to Mayakoba. We know that golf course real well. Wish they would let us do the deep dive, but it does not look like they posted that. They just have like their pairings and shit up. So no pin sheet yet. That's something that they need to improve on. They're starting to give us every shot, which was an improvement we all asked for. So thank you, LIV. And they're starting to make the field better. So they're at least listening on some of it, right? They're making the field deeper, which is, I think, maybe the biggest complaint that LIV had last year. So at least they're making it more watchable. And at least it's the only golf that we can watch here on Sunday. Like literally the only watchable golf. It will 100% be preferred lives. Yeah, it will. With all that rain, if they're even going to get playing, it will 100% be that. Was deep diving, but missed the stream. Good morning. Hey, it'll be on replay for you. You can scroll back, watch whatever you need to. You made it here eventually. That's what matters. And good morning to you yourself and sipping on that coffee. All right. So in terms of what we're going to take after my mini panic attack there, after realizing that the winds hadn't gotten that higher, a few guys that got bumped here. So just looking at the board, it looks like the whole board was bumped down about 0.5. There are a few guys that haven't been bumped down that we can probably find some value on. So first off, screw prize picks and them going out there and just bumping everything. It is beyond annoying at this stage. But an over I like on birdies would be Bryson DeChambeau. And we can bring up the LIV Golf stats. So just like the PGA slate, I think a lot of people don't realize that LIV also has a stats page, right? Like a whole tab you can go to. And now it's not as advanced, right? It's what you have on the PGA Tour, but it's good for doing research on props like this. So I'll show you guys where to find it. So if you go over here on LIV, you go to the right side, you scroll down, you click on the stats page. You'll bring up at least some sort of like preliminary stats, right? You got like fairways hit, scrambling, greens regulation on here, a lot of just like your regular stats, and then birdies, right? So this isn't birdies or better, so I don't think eagles are counted on this, which is a little bit annoying, right? We're obviously counting birdies or better when we're playing someone like Bryson over 3.5. But last year, he made 185 birdies and had 4.74 birdies per round. Now, the LIV average would go down here towards the middle of the pack, right? It was like 3.9, maybe 4 birdies per round. So that means that on average, again, these are rough numbers because Bryson makes a lot of eagles, right? And those eagles aren't going to show up on this. Makes about 0.75 more birdies or better per round compared to your tour average. Now, because he's such a high eagle percentage player, it's probably closer to 0.8, maybe even 0.85 more birdies per round. And if we're expecting the birdie average at this course, right, to be 4.3 per round, 4.2 on, let's say, the modest end,
That puts him at right around a 5 birdie projection. And I think the X factor with Bryson DeChambeau is the fact that he's won 3 of his last 5 events. He's the #1 player on the tour in shots gained total. So if you just look at like the averages for the field, right, just calculate shots gained total the old-fashioned way, he's been the #1 player on that tour for the last 4 months. I mean, he's an elite tier birdie maker projected pretty much at the field average, or maybe just marginally higher, right, than the field average. And all we're asking him to do is gain less than a birdie per round to the field to cover, which in calm wind conditions is something I'm comfortable doing. And I don't care if Bryson didn't have the best day. In fact, he hasn't covered this number in either day so far. That's okay, right? It's their first event of the year. They're going to be a little bit rusty. He has 2 rounds under his belt. Hell, he made 2 eagles yesterday. No birdies, which is just crazy. It's unheard of, right? For someone to make 2 eagles and no birdies on the day. Day 1, he hooked this number, right? Making 4 birdies. He's going to go out there and have himself a day at some point, right? He's been the best player on this tour. It's not like he's playing dreadfully, right? I mean, the truth is he's +2 and he's there tied for 29th, right? Which is like middle of the pack over here in this golf tournament. I expect to see a little bit of a spike day at some point. So I'm taking Bryson for the over there, and we're going to have to find another prop because a lot of what I took were these strokes guys, and they all got bumped down. Literally the entire board got bumped. Terrell Haddon actually got bumped down a whole stroke from 69.5 down to 68.5. Gooch was at 69.5. I had his under, but we could take this. Actually, I think Sergio is probably the best pair. So if we're going to enter anything here for the stream, at least on the prize pick side, we'll have more over here in Underdog, but it would be this over on Bryson at 4.5 and this under on Sergio at 70. We already talked about the Bryson prop quite a bit. Sergio Garcia is another player that's been really good over here on the LIV Tour of late. I believe it's like 3 top 10 finishes in a row. He's gaining over a stroke per round to the field over here on the LIV Golf side. And to this point, is in contention, right? He's up there in 4th place. Yesterday in the real windy conditions was able to shoot a 70, which is an accomplishment, especially with the bogey on a par 5. If we go to day 1, right, when it was less windy out there, he shot 6 under par, right? He shot 65. He's using one of his old putters this week, something I caught on the LIV broadcast yesterday, a putter that he hasn't used in like 5 years. And in day 1 was making everything. I mean, even yesterday was making a lot of par saves out there with that putter. I mean, Sergio, with any semblance of a putter, is a borderline elite tier player, right? I mean, he's one of the best ball strikers in golf history, and that's not an exaggeration. He's that good with the irons. There's a reason why he's going to be a Hall of Fame player when he retires, right? Even with all this LIV BS, and I'm sure is going to hang over these players' heads. But he's a for sure Hall of Famer because of how he's played. Major championships are really the only blemish on his scorecard, we'll say, right? He doesn't have maybe the major championship success that he was hoping for. But yeah, you give Sergio a hot putter, and I'm all for it. So at 70, he'd have to shoot -1 to push, which would be about gaining like 0.5 strokes to the field to go out there and push at 70. And then anything on top of that would be gravy. So for somebody in contention, obviously has a lot on the line here on Sunday. I like that under for Sergio. So the Bryson one was probably my favorite lean, but that one's solid too. Does Aberg take it? I think he's got a really good chance, but they've got to play for him to take it. And I'm not sold that they're actually going to play the final round. I would say it's 50-50 at best that they're even going to be able to play, which is depressing to hear, but it's true. It's the truth. They probably aren't playing. So let's see. We've got this LIV board up now, and it looks like they're on their bumping bullshit too. Does not surprise me. I actually had a few unders over here on birdies, and it wasn't because of the conditions. It was more so because of the averages and the projections they were at. So I'll give you guys these props. So if they post them back in Underdog, you can enter them. But it was an under on Bubba Watson at 4.5 birdies. So 4.5 birdies would be over the expected field average for birdies. And Bubba Watson, just to show you this, right, was a bottom 5 birdie maker last year. In fact, he was 5th from the bottom there at 43rd in birdie average. Only made about 3.2 per round. Is about 0.7 less than the field average, right? So, kind of like we did the math for Bryson, right? But we added the 0.7 for him. If the field average is going to be like 4.3 per round, that puts them at about like a 3.6, maybe a 3.7 birdie average on the optimistic end of the spectrum. So at 4.5 birdies, right, he'd have to gain about 1.3 birdies to the field to hit. Whereas on the other end of the spectrum, right, we had Bryson at 4.5 that essentially is projected, right, to go out there and cover his projection. So that's why I liked the under rather than the over here on somebody like Bubba. And then the other prop I took, did they still have Rom at 5.5? So yeah, we can still take this over on Rom at 5.5. Go ahead and throw him in there. But he was one of the guys I was considering. And it was also an under on Joaquin Niemann at 5.5 birdies. So over here in Prize Picks, they've got him at 4.5 birdies. You can see over there with Joaquin Niemann. I actually think I would lean over at 4.5, but at 5.5 birdies, I'd be leaning under for sure, right? For Joaquin to go out there and make 6 birdies, he'd have to gain about a birdie and a half to the field to do so. And while Joaquin, kind of seems like a high birdie percentage player, the stats didn't really bear that out, right? So if you take a look at his stats from last year, he averaged 4.15 birdies per round. That was 0.15, approximately, right? 0.15 more than the field average out there for LIV. So if you take that same thing, right, 0.15 more than the average at about a 4.3 average, that's about 4.5 birdies, right? So that's pretty much right at where his projection is on Prize Picks. Now he's playing better this week, right? So that's why I would lean on his over. But to think he's going to get to 6, right, and cover this kind of projection, he was 5.5 over here on Underdog, is optimistic to say the least. So I like this over on Jon Rahm at 5.5. He's chasing. He's in second place right now, 4 shots off the lead of Joaquin Niemann. You know he's going to be aggressive. You know that he's going to be taking aim at every single pin, and he's going to be by far your number 1 birdie maker on tour. I mean, compared to DJ, Cam Smith, Bryson, I think that somebody like Jon Rahm is going to make at least a half a birdie more, per round to the field, which puts him at about 1.2 birdies per round more than the field average. And if we put him at like a 1.2 more per round average, in fact, it might even be closer to like 1.5 more per round than the field. That would put him at like a 5.8 birdie projection, right? 5.85 birdie projection. He's just that much better than the rest of the field that even at 5.5 birdies, I would take his over. Like he's one of the few humans that you could warrant playing an over at this kind of projection. So I like the Jon Rahm over. Right now, right, a few of those props aren't up over here in Underdog, but if they repost them, take advantage, right? So whether it's an under on Joaquin Niemann, if you were to put in under on birdies, I'm not taking this under on Brooks, right? This is just for example purposes, right? 3.21x, right? So if you anti-correlate it a little bit, you get a little bit of a boost to your payout. If you don't want to anti-correlate, you could always take the Bryson over, right? He was at 4.5 birdies. If they repost that at some point, they could pair that up with a Jon Rahm. Either type of slip is fine. If you want to correlate the two, hope conditions are even easier than expected, by all means do that. But I kind of like the fact that they posted a guys, a little bit too high, because then we can get a slightly higher payout than we normally would, right there at 3.21x. So that's it for the LIV prop side. If you're going to play Showdown, let me bring up the DraftKings Showdown for LIV. I haven't looked at it yet. I haven't played LIV Showdown for a while. I'm waiting until they have Shot Tracker to really make it a big part of my process. But why not take a gander at it, right? I mean, we've got some time here. I'm going to talk about LIV a little bit. Let's do so. It's the only golf we've got today, so we might as well dive in, huh? Let's see. Let's bring that up, see if there's any questions in chat. Millions of dollars to hand out. You make them play, in your opinion. I would love that as a fan. I'm definitely hoping that's the case, but I've got a bad feeling about it, especially with how much CBS was talking about the potential for it to only be 54 holes. It feels like they know something. That's what I'll say about that. Playing some LIV Showdown today. I'm thinking I'm going to. Yeah. Do I have a average to par opinion for my Coba? I would say like half a stroke under par. About a half a stroke under is what I would guess. Again, there's a lot of outliers on LIV, both positive and negative, with guys blowing up, guys shooting 59, like you had there with Joaquin Niemann. But yeah, about a half a stroke under par average is what I would imagine. All right, let's talk about this. So Jon Rahm's 12.5. That's crazy. So I told you guys, right? He's that much better than everyone else. And DraftKings seems to agree. So you've got a crazy price on him. I don't know if that's that surprising, but you've got that to work with. Brooks down here at $9,800. And let's check out their details. So do they do placement points? Is I guess the real question. Because again, I haven't played LIV Showdown. I don't even know how this works. Let's see. Doesn't look like there's any placement, right? So unlike a PGA Tour event, it's a good thing we checked this, right? There's no placement points from round 3 Showdown. So you're just essentially playing this like you would for round 1 and 2 showdown for PGA, right? Even a round 3 showdown out there for the PGA side, and just trying to find ceiling rounds. So with the easier conditions, I think you can take shots on guys further down the board. So I think like a DJ and a Cam Smith make a whole lot of sense, right? At their type of projection. So let's go ahead and throw them in. Speaking of DJ and Cam Smith, do they still have them at 68.5? They do. If you want to enter something right now, you can enter DJ under 68.5 with John Rahm, or you could even do Cam Smith. I think those would work. I forgot that I took those, and I forgot that they were still on the board. So over here for DFS purposes, though, I think they make quite a bit of sense, right? They're going to be slightly lower owned than guys like a Neiman or a John Rahm. You're still getting elite tier players at that kind of price tag. So maybe you pick your favorite of the bunch, right? Just for the sake of this, let's throw in like a Cam Smith. Down here in the 9K range, Patrick Reed has an uncanny ability to pop on Sundays. We've seen that on the LIV Tour. We saw him on the PGA Tour right before he left. So $9,200. I love that. Let's see. And the added bonus over here, guys, is normally people would look at Mito Pereira, right, at $8,400. They go, oh, he's well over par, right? Can't play him. He's nearly dead last place. He has no reason to even try on Sunday. Incorrect. That's where you forgot about LIV's format, right? LIV's format is not just individual. It also brings in the team component. And guess whose team is in first place right now? Oh, Torque, right? Mito Pereira's team. So I can guarantee you he's going to give a few more shits today than, the other guys that are up there at +4, +5, whose teams are completely out of it, right? Because Joaquin Niemann, Sebastian Munoz have played so well over the first 2 days. Mito, despite being absolute dog water, not doing jack shit for his team, is playing for something on Sunday, right? So, and if you think they don't care about that, you're sorely mistaken. They get paid $4 million. Actually, I think it might be they get paid a lot. Put it this way, it's a shit ton of money that you win if you win the team competition for that given week. That gets split over the team. They care about it, right? I think it's at least $1 million to the winning team that goes out there and wins, which means that Mito Pereira, right, is playing for $250,000. I mean, I've seen guys play harder on the PGA Tour for a $50,000 check, right? Like they care about that. I can tell you that much. So if you throw him into a lineup, essentially he's going to be unowned. I think that that's an edge you can take advantage of. A few other guys that I know are in contention. So like Brendan Grace, right? You would normally go, you can't play that guy, right? He's +9. He's playing horribly. He's not going to care on Sunday. Again, you're sorely mistaken because the Stingers are up there in like 4th place in the team competition. And I think if they move up 1, maybe 2 spots, they might be in like 5th place. They get onto the podium, and that's when you start to get those extra checks. And I believe on Sunday, someone correct me if I'm wrong here, all 4 scores count. It's at least 3 scores that are counting out of the 4. I think it might even be all 4 scores. Actually, I think it's 3. Almost certain, yeah. So 3 out of the 4 scores are going to count. So Grace, like, he can't be a stinker. He can't go out there and shoot like 5 over par, or else they have no wiggle room to work with as a team, right? To go out there and try and move up and get onto that podium. So that's an advantage that I've taken advantage of from the prop side, right? Is maybe fading guys that aren't in contention and don't have their team in contention. But also on the other side of things, right? Giving a little bit more of a leash to guys that, are at least in the competition for the team, right? Somebody like a Mito Pereira or Brendan Grace, for example. But outside of that, I mean, it looks like the type of slate where you can try and find some of those mini edges, but just try and find the game theory angle, right? Just like for PGA DFS. And again, I don't have data to support this, but this is just my first instinct, right? Is that guys like Burmester are going to get a ton of ownership, right? At $8,600, even without the placement points, just because that's how people build their lineups, right? They go on here, they go, ooh, Neiman's playing. Mo is in first place. Got to take him, right, for Sunday Showdown. John Rahm's going to be an obvious click, right? He'll be one of the most popular players. That's not a surprise so much. But like guys like a Sergio, right? He's going to get some extra attention. Burmester, we already talked about. Sebastian Munoz, I think he'll be pretty chalky. I like the play with Munoz. Actually, I'm probably going to build a few lineups after we get off stream here. We got another 3 hours before lock. I'll probably have Munoz in a few. He goes nuclear quite a bit out there for the showdown side. But like Herbert, probably getting some attention. All of these guys that are over par are going to essentially be unowned. So at least that's what I'm expecting, right? If it's anything like PGA DFS. So interesting slate. I'll definitely be dabbling a little bit on that end, but we'll have to see. I'm thinking a balanced approach, right? Maybe avoiding Rahm and Neiman out there for showdown purposes, and just taking that game theory approach. Like Terrell Hatton is like the perfect showdown play. And I hate that I'm giving away all my plays here, but I'm probably not playing against you, right? They're all real small single entries that they've got out there in DK. And if you are playing, do not enter the same contest as me. That would be a little bit rude, right? Especially because I'm giving you guys like who I'm playing today. But like Terrell Hatton at $9,300. His team, Legion 13, right? The one with John Rahm is in second place currently, right? So like John Rahm's obviously going to care him. He's in second place. We know he's going to try and win the golf tournament. But Terrell Hatton at even par, right? T24. I mean, he's out of contention, right? He's not going to win, but his team needs him to win, right? If he goes out there and he has a good round, they may end up knocking off Torquay at the top of the board. So I think the team component just first off makes it better to watch, but it also adds a lot of intrigue in terms of motivation, right? Like for Sunday Showdown, for example, like PGA side, do we really think, this is even if they play, right? I have to always put that disclaimer out here with this slate. Like, even if they play, do we really think Rory's going to give a fuck? Probably not, right? Do we really think somebody like Matsuyama is going to try whatsoever out there for Sunday? Probably not, right? Just going to show up because they have to. Whereas over here on LIV, they have monetary value to go out there and try, but also I think even more so than the money that they can make, they care about letting their teammates down, right? Because sure, $250,000 might not, be life-changing to John Rahm. It's certainly not, right? He's what, $500 million at this point. Same thing with Terrell Hatton, right? He's worth like probably $150-200 million. The guy is set for life at this point. But for Caleb Surratt, it matters a whole lot, right? Kieran Vincent, right? They're teammates out there. It means a whole lot. And if you don't think John Rahm doesn't want to win his first team event ever, I mean, you just don't know John Rahm, right? You don't know the type of competitor that he is. So I think that aspect of it might be one of the bigger edges that we have on Showdown is knowing what players care. So just to go to the leaderboard, just to show you guys, in case you haven't been paying attention to the event, which couldn't blame you for. It's LIV Golf. Not everyone's cup of tea, right? You've got Torquay in first, Legion in second, Smash in third. So you know that Brooks will be carrying, right? We know that guys like Kokrak, Gooch, maybe worth a few looks out there for Showdown. Stinger, we've already mentioned. Fireball's in sixth. I would say that Fireballs down here in seventh are probably the cutoff, right? Like these teams at -2 probably aren't getting into podium position, but guys like Fireballs at -4, right? They shoot -7, -8 as a team, well, which isn't that far-fetched, right? You've got whole 3 scores to work with to go out there and go low. They could get into podium position. So from anyone from 7 up, I would be considering these guys as maybe extra value out there for DFS. And you can see here with Bryson, another reason I wanted to play him, right, is their team's in 5th, right? They're not completely out of it for trying to get a podium position. And Bryson is one of the guys that you can tell cares about the team competition, right? First off, Crushers won the team championship last year. So they have a lot of team chemistry. And you can tell that they're one of the few squads out there that has some pride, right, in going out there and podium and going out there and winning as a team, as opposed to, I don't want to pick on any teams out here, but like the high flyers don't look like they really give a fuck. The Majestics are dog shit, washed up. They do not give a fuck at this point. They're out there just to, get a check. They have been horrible for quite some time as a team. But like Torquay, for example, is literally every single week is showing up. So like, I don't know whether it's form. I don't know whether just some teams are better than the others or whether they care more, but a lot of times it's the same type of teams that are showing up. And for the team competition, that matters, especially for DFS. Let's see. Any other questions? Playing in the $5, $300 caddy for small fishing. Yeah, not a lot of big contests out there, right? What are the odds they play 72? I'd say 50-50. You bet $500 on Clark to wins. If he's declared winner, do you win the bet? It depends on the book that you're playing. So a lot of books, I'd say most books, this is not the answer you want to hear, but it's the answer, have clauses in their terms of conditions to void those bets, right? That's an edge that has been exploited before, right? Having an event that's likely to be canceled. And a lot of times these books are still putting 200, plus 300 numbers out there on those players. And they've been taken for millions of dollars before. Right. There's already been heists on the sports books out there where people have gone $1 million paydays off this kind of thing. And because of that, they've adjusted. Right. So if you're at a book that hasn't adjusted yet, yes, you should probably be betting Wyndham Clark. Right. Because if it's a 50-50 chance that they even play the golf tournament, he should probably be at worst -100. Right. Should at least be minus money to go out there and win, you're getting plus 200 odds, right? So you're getting a lot better win probability than you should. So check your book, look at the terms and conditions. I know on Hard Rock Bet, I believe it's one of the few books where if you bet them to win, you'll actually get paid out on it. Now, I'm trusting what I saw on Twitter. There was somebody that asked support what would happen if you bet on Wyndham Clark and they ended the golf tournament. They said that they would pay it out, but that support guy could also be full of shit. So if you're going to go out there and make that investment, you need to do the research, right? Make sure you're not going to get screwed. At worst, you're going to get refunded, right? So you're not going to get screwed out of your money unless they play the event, right? And in that case, then you might not win. Yep, with Hen. Yep. You've been watching. You watched Neiman's 59. Dude was dialed. Yeah, I saw the highlights of that. I was actually out playing golf when he shot that 59, so I was able to watch it live, but was tracking on my phone. Yesterday, though, was home watching golf. So yeah, I watched some live golf, and obviously today be quite a bit of watching as well. That's all I've got for this live stream, though, guys. Got to go ahead, get some chores and errands done over here on a Sunday. But I appreciate all the support here as per usual. Go ahead, smash that like button on the way out of here. Go out there, win a GPP, take home some props, go out there, cash out on that end, and let's have ourselves a week next week for the Waste Management Phoenix Open. I'm looking forward to that. It's obviously not an elevated field this time, but you're going to get almost all the world's best showing up because it is such a prestigious venue, such a fun event, right, with all the energy out there at TPC Scottsdale. So looking forward to that. Going to be doing props, showdown, DFS, all of that for the Waste Management. And I'm going to be on the road, so the showdown streams will be a thing, but the schedule might be a little bit wacky this time as I'm visiting some family back in Pittsburgh. So going to do that. Going to be a little bit off with the schedule, but it'll be all the content as per usual. Appreciate you guys. Best of luck out there. Why I win. And let's have ourselves a Sunday.